This video is about scales, how they work, and how we use them. So if you haven't seen the last video that I did on chords, that would be a good idea. So let's start with what we call the chromatic scale. So this scale contains all the 12 notes that you would see in Western music. The notes are named using the letters A to G, but this only gives us 7 notes. So the other notes are found in between these notes. So these notes can be named relative to the note they come after, and we call these notes sharps. So you can see the little hash symbol here for a sharp. We can also name these notes relative to the note that they come before, and we call these notes flats. You can see there B flat is before B, for example. So we've got all the 12 notes, and just to reiterate, you can see that sharps and flats are just different ways of naming the notes. So there's A sharp, B flat, C sharp, and D flat, etc. They're the same notes. So the sharps and flats are the black keys on the piano. There are no sharps and flats between the notes B and C, or between the notes E and F. And this is because these notes are already a semitone apart. And in Western music, the smallest interval we can have is a semitone. So, as I said at the start, these 12 notes are referred to as the chromatic scale. Any other type of scale will use groups of these notes. Most scales contain 7 notes. So let's look at the C major scale. So you'll see it's a 7-note scale. Got the notes C, D, E, F, G, A, and B. See the 8th note there, which we call the octave, is just the same as the first note of the scale. So the scale can keep repeating up octaves. So, as an example, here's 2 E's on the guitar. And let's listen to the C major scale being repeated in 2 octaves. So a scale is defined by the intervals between the notes. So here we've got our C major scale again, and you can see the number of semitones between each note in the scale. Let's listen to the A major scale now and look at the notes, and what you'll notice is that the pattern of semitones is the same, and that's because they are both major scales, and it's that pattern of semitones that defines a scale. So let's compare the major scale with the natural minor scale, another type of scale. So there's C major again. Have a listen to C natural minor and look at the notes. You'll notice there are some different notes in there, and in colour, I have put where the number of semitones between notes are different. Okay, you'll notice the pattern is different. So degrees 3, 6, and 7 of the major scale have been flattened to arrive at the natural minor scale. So let's take this a step further, and we're going to build chords from each degree of each of the scales. Okay, in the chord video, the last video that I did before this, I showed how to build a chord. We take every second note and add them in a sequence like this, so you end up with the 1, the 3, and the 5. Okay, so what you'll notice as we start doing this is that all of these chords, well, if we're comparing the two scales, are different. So let's just take an example. So here we're on the third chord, which in C major ends up being an E minor chord, whereas in C natural minor, the third chord is an E flat major. Okay? So the simple reason that you end up with these different chords is that we have different notes. We've got 3 different notes in the natural minor scale. So you might be thinking that this is kind of boring, and you are kind of right, but this is very useful knowledge if you want to, particularly if you want to make your own music, okay? But also if you want to understand how your favorite artists are writing music. There are 2 main applications. So using a scale as a key. So earlier we built chords from C major and C minor scales, and we saw that the intervals were different and produced different chords, and this is what gives a scale a specific sound. So the major scale has a happy sound. So let's listen to, here's a chord progression where we've taken some chords from the C major scale. And that all sounds pretty happy, pretty familiar sounding. Now let's listen to chords from C natural minor scale. Okay, now that sounds a bit more sad, doesn't it? Okay, so there it is again, the major chord progression. Here's the minor again. So the other application is using scales to play over chords. Okay, if we're trying to make some kind of melodies or make a guitar solo, for example, chords and scales are just groups of notes. So if we find ones that a scale and a chord shares, then we can use that scale to play over the chord. So let's listen to this A minor chord and how each of these different scales sounds over it. A natural minor scale. Now a harmonic minor scale next. A different flavour. Now let's listen to a melodic minor. So how do you know which scales to use over a chord? Well, kind of looked at that just then. So you can use the scale of the key over any chord. So in this example, we've got the key of G major, and we're playing all of the chords of G major, and you can hear how just simply playing that scale, the G major scale up and down, sounds good over all the chords. So that's one way, but the more complicated way, which is sort of how things are done in jazz, is to play a different scale over each chord. So here we've got a chord progression, G minor, A flat major to C minor. And we're going to use G natural minor scale over the G minor, then A flat major scale over the A flat major chord, C harmonic minor over the C minor chord. Remember, we could have just used the C natural minor scale over all of the chords because these chords are from the key of C minor. So another important thing to know is that when we're playing a scale over a chord, we're just selecting notes from the scale. We're not playing the scale up and down or using all of the notes in the scale. So here's another example. We've got a chord progression of F minor to G major to C minor. So let's look at the notes in each chord. F minor has F, A flat, C. We've got G, B, D and G major, and C, E flat and G and C minor. So we've decided to choose some scales. You can see them there. And the reason for that, which I'll show in a little bit more detail here, okay, so let's look at the notes of each scale. So F natural minor has the notes F, G, A flat, B flat, C, D flat, and E. Got G, A, B, C, D, E, and F in the G Mixolydian scale. And, well, we've already gone through the C natural minor scale before, but there are the notes. You'll see in colour the notes that are called chord tones. So they are in the chord that scale is playing over. So F, A flat, and C are in the F minor chord. Okay? So you'll see down the bottom, and you'll hear in the background a sequence of notes that we've chosen to play using these scales. So you'll notice with the notes that we've chosen, we've got a mix of notes that are being played over the chords that are in the chord, so the chord tones. So you'll see over the F minor, we've got F, C, and A flat in that sequence of notes. But also an important device that we're using here is we've got the semitone movement from the first note in the next chord and the note that was played on the chord before it. So let's take a listen. Bye.